Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass have already proven their incompetence and poor leadership during the Los Angeles wildfires. Now, as we experience rampant lawlessness and civil unrest, it's never been more clear California's in a state of turmoil. And I ask my fellow Angelenos, why are Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass still in office?
Mel, any message from you to Governor Newsom or Karen Bass tonight?
Spend less on hair gel. That's it.
Yeah.
You know, what can I say to them? Not big admirer of either.
I don't like him either.
Newsom walked in carrying himself like California's golden boy, calm and confident. Then Mel Gibson stepped into the spotlight and completely changed the tone. Gavin may have expected another political back and forth, but Gibson came out swinging, taking direct aim at his leadership and public image. This wasn't a typical debate, it felt more like a one-sided showdown. By the time it was over, Gibson hadn't just challenged Newsom, he had delivered a blistering critique that left a lasting impression.
We deserve much more and much better, and there is absolutely no adequate excuse the governor or mayor can make for this gross mismanagement and failure to preemptively deal with what they knew was coming.
California didn't just elect a governor, it cast the lead actor in a political drama called As the State Burns. Gavin Newsom often seems less focused on governing and more focused on the performance of it all. He projects the image of a polished, steady leader, even as critics argue the state faces growing challenges. To them, his record reads like a lesson in pushing away businesses, taxpayers, and common sense. Yet somehow, he always finds time to perfect that camera-ready smile and well-rehearsed confidence.
And Mel Gibson had some very interesting things to say about California Governor Gavin Newsom's failure to prepare the state for these catastrophic wildfires that are ravaging LA still.
In 2019, I think Newsom said, I'm going to take care of the forests and maintain the forests and do all that kind of stuff. He didn't do anything.
Didn't do anything. And then on top of that, they cut the water off.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's all funny. And then I think all our tax dollars probably went for Gavin's hair gel. I don't know, but it's like, it's sad. It's like the place is just on fire.
If you're enjoying this takedown, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. He's got the posture of a superhero, the hair of a shampoo commercial, and the backbone of a jellyfish. Newsom is the kind of politician you could trip into a pothole on a crumbling street, blame the road itself, and then spend the next 20 minutes giving a polished speech about bold new solutions and innovation.
How much more of their destructive decision-making masquerading as leadership are we going to tolerate? It's time to take back our community and our state and put the power and the privilege in the hands of competent leaders whose goals are to protect us and the way of life this nation was founded upon and promises to offer. That's all.
Just look at the homelessness crisis. California spends billions of dollars year after year, yet many areas still resemble the backdrop of a dystopian film where the director keeps demanding more chaos, more disorder. Gavin steps in front of the cameras wearing his serious expression and rolls out another polished plan that sounds a lot like the one before it. But the tents are still there, the encampments keep expanding, and parts of downtown San Francisco feel less like the neighbor of Silicon Valley and more like a scene from The Walking Dead. At the same time, businesses have been leaving California at a rapid pace. Tesla moved its headquarters to Texas, while many small business owners argue they're being squeezed by high taxes and complicated regulations. Yet Newsom often appears surprised by the trend, as though it's impossible to understand why some people might rethink paying premium prices, dealing with a high cost of living, and navigating ongoing concerns about the state's direction.
Now, a lot of people have been coming out and calling out Gavin Newsom endlessly, and the biggest one of all is Mel Gibson. We all know that he is a very big, open critic of Gavin Newsom, and he continues to actually do that, and rightfully so, because we already know that there's a lot of issues going on right now within the state of California.
California's blackout issues sometimes feel like something straight out of a comedy sketch. Residents pay some of the highest energy rates in the country, yet still worry about losing power when demand spikes. Freezers warm up, groceries go to waste, and frustration grows. Gavin Newsom talks about leading the way on green energy, but critics argue that depending on power from neighboring states isn't exactly the picture of energy independence. For many families, it doesn't feel like progress, it feels like another problem to manage. Then there's the water situation. California sits beside the Pacific Ocean and relies on snowpack from its mountains, yet drought restrictions have become a familiar part of life. Homeowners are urged to cut back, farmers struggle with uncertainty, and debates continue over how water resources should be prioritized. Critics say Gavin's approach relies too heavily on restrictions rather than long-term solutions. To them, the strategy often appears reactive instead of effective. And if Mel Gibson ever decides to bring back Mad Max, some would joke that he won't need an elaborate movie set. All he'd have to do is point the cameras toward California and yell, "Action!"
Gibson lost his house in these wildfires. And what you just saw there was an effort to recall the governor and Mayor Bass. Does his star power in this matter?
It matters in the sense we're playing it now on national television on a highly rated Fox and Friends first show, and that has gone viral on social media. And meanwhile, the same day that Mel Gibson says what he says there, and he's correct on so many things as far as the management of wildfires, Gavin Newsom's approval on the handling of the wildfires is only 30%.
Wow.
Then came the pandemic, and critics say Gavin Newsom's biggest problem wasn't just the restrictions, it was the double standard. While millions of Californians canceled weddings, funerals, and family gatherings, Newsom was photographed dining at one of Napa's most exclusive restaurants. In an instant, he became the poster child for rules for thee, but not for me. Education and public safety haven't escaped criticism either. Despite being home to massive wealth and technological innovation, California continues to face concerns over struggling schools and rising crime in some communities. Retail theft has become such a common complaint that more everyday items are being locked behind glass cases. Meanwhile, Gavin insists things are improving. His critics aren't buying it. To them, California increasingly feels less like the Golden State and more like a live-action version of Grand Theft Shopping Cart.
And Governor Gavin Newsom and LA Mayor Karen Bass, well, they were also suggesting that LA was under control. They had it covered while, of course, LA was essentially burning. And they've been blaming Donald Trump for all the chaos in LA, while Gavin Newsom has been trying to emerge as the strong leader of the Democrats as he eyes off the presidency in 3 years' time. But actor Mel Gibson has spoken out, blasting the governor and the mayor, rightfully so, for their disastrous leadership.
For many Californians, owning a home feels out of reach, and even young professionals are stuck renting with multiple roommates well into their 30s. Families are squeezing into smaller spaces, while new housing plans are announced, but rarely seem to match the scale of the problem. On the national stage, Newsom projects ambition, but critics say his record doesn't match the image. They argue he presents California as a model for the country, even as everyday issues like housing, crime, and infrastructure remain unresolved in the eyes of many residents. Supporters call it progress, critics call it spin. And somewhere in between, Californians are still waiting for solutions that feel real, not just announcements.
If I were giving the governor advice, I'd say, don't be so overt that people can see the wheels turning. The obvious question would be, well, you've been governor of California for 6 years. You were lieutenant governor for many years before that. When did you have this epiphany? Right. And the answer is when he found that the Republicans the issue.
There's also the sense that politics in California has turned into a kind of performance. Critics say Gavin Newsom often comes across more like a media figure than a traditional governor, with appearances and messaging that feel carefully staged, while ongoing issues continue to build in the background. He's often accused of projecting one image publicly while facing criticism over contradictions, supporting climate action while using high-emission travel for events, or speaking about inequality while being seen in very affluent settings. To supporters, it's leadership. To critics, it looks like image over substance. Wildfires have also become a defining issue. Each year, Californians brace for fire season as homes are lost and communities are displaced. Newsom regularly appears in response, emphasizing recovery efforts and climate explanations, while critics argue that prevention and infrastructure improvements haven't kept pace with the scale of the crisis. For many residents, the frustration isn't just the disasters themselves, but the feeling that long-term solutions are still catching up.
We have to do a better job. We need competent, good governance. Now, that doesn't mean you can't criticize the governor of California for, I think, some very bad decisions over a very long period of time. I mean, some of these reservoirs have been dry for 15, 20 years. The fire hydrants are being reported as going dry while the firefighters are trying to...
California's budget tells a similar story. The state collects huge revenue through some of the highest taxes in the country, yet still faces ongoing budget shortfalls. Critics argue that money is often announced in big surplus headlines, only for the numbers to shift or disappear into complex spending plans that are hard to track. Meanwhile, many public systems like roads, schools, and safety services continue to face pressure and underperformance. On the environmental side, Gavin has pushed ambitious goals like phasing out gas-powered cars by 2035. Supporters call it forward-thinking, but critics question how realistic it is when the current energy grid already faces strain during peak demand. The contrast between long-term climate goals and present-day infrastructure challenges is a recurring point of debate. Regulations are another frequent criticism. Building projects often move through long approval processes involving permits, fees, and zoning rules, which many say slows down housing development and drives up costs. To critics, this creates a system where solving the housing crisis becomes harder than the crisis itself. For supporters, these are necessary protections and reforms. For critics, they're signs of a system that moves too slowly to keep up with reality.
And look at Gavin Newsom. He tried to do this, was it a radio show, a podcast, whatever he tried to do. Now he's busy trolling on social media, and it's cringe, it's falling flat. I'm sure they'll come after me now, who cares? Because Donald Trump is one of one. Only he can do what he's done with social media, with podcasts, in the way he's done it. 900 rallies and counting.
Gas prices are another common frustration. Californians often pay more at the pump than most of the country, while states like Texas see significantly lower costs. Critics argue that it's not just oil prices, but also taxes and regulations that add to the burden, while supporters point to broader energy and environmental policies. There's also been a steady outflow of people and businesses leaving the state for places like Texas, Florida, and Arizona, often citing cost of living and regulations as key reasons. Even a high-profile recall effort reflected deep political division, though the governor ultimately stayed in office. On public safety, retail theft and organized shoplifting have become a major concern in some areas, with many stores responding by locking up everyday items or shutting locations altogether. Officials often point to policy changes and enforcement challenges, while critics say the response hasn't gone far enough. Despite all of this, Gavin continues to position himself as a national figure. Supporters see ambition and leadership. Critics see a disconnect between the image and the reality on the ground.
It's curious. We see a lot of the cities that you can't conceal carry, or it's extremely hard to get concealed carry, or California being one of them. Yeah. Illinois, New York. I mean, do you think that everyday citizens carrying a reduces crime or increases crime?
I think the evidence suggests the opposite. It increases the likelihood of death.
The biggest irony, critics say, is California's climate leadership narrative. While the state pushes aggressive environmental policies, wildfire seasons continue to produce massive emissions and widespread destruction. Supporters frame the policies as long-term solutions, but critics argue the immediate results tell a more complicated story. More broadly, Newsom is often described by opponents as more focused on presentation than execution. Each crisis becomes a public moment, complete with polished messaging and camera-ready appearances, while everyday problems like housing costs, homelessness, and infrastructure continue to dominate local concerns. To his supporters, he's a modern leader managing difficult challenges. To his critics, he's a political performer operating in a state where reality is becoming harder to ignore.
He plays this slick little game of words. He doesn't say crime goes up, he says deaths go up. Why? Because that phrasing triggers your brain into thinking are the problem. But let's break that down. If you've got more in one state than the other, obviously the number of deaths involved is going to be higher in that state. That doesn't mean it's more dangerous. It just means the tools used are different. You know where the death rate is low.
In the end, Gavin Newsom is often described by critics less as a traditional leader and more as a symbol of California's broader political debate. A state once known for opportunity and growth is now frequently discussed in terms of high costs, infrastructure challenges, and ongoing public frustration. Supporters see a governor dealing with complex long-term issues. Critics see a focus on image and messaging, where California's problems are acknowledged but not always resolved at the pace people expect. Despite the criticism, Newsom continues to present himself as a national figure with ambitions beyond the state. But for many observers, the contrast between the public image and the day-to-day reality in California is what defines his legacy debate. Whether history views him as a reformer or a symbol of mismanagement remains part of an ongoing political divide.